ideaForge, India's first startup from an academic incubator to launch its IPO and go public. And who is better than the man himself? Ladies and gentlemen, with a thunderous round of applause, I invite the co-founder of ideaForge, Mr. Rahul Singh. I request Mr. Rahul to kindly address the audience and share his story about how ideaForge started from an idea and reached the great height of becoming India's first startup from an academic incubator to launch its IPO and go public. Over to you, Rahul.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rahul. I'm part of ideaForge. I'll do a quick introduction of what ideaForge is. Today, ideaForge is the largest drone manufacturer for the defense and civil applications in the country. And our story began more than 17 years back earlier. And I'll take you through the whole story. But I'm guessing the reason we are here is because we represent one of the success stories of the whole incubation ecosystem. And we are here to celebrate the whole process of incubation and what it means for enterprises like us, and how do we increase the creation of such success stories as we go ahead. The theme of the talk is idea to IPO, the whole journey. And coincidentally, our organization itself is called ideaForge. So idea is at the core part of our name and identity. Our story goes back about 20 years. All of us co-founders met each other while being at IIT Bombay back in 2002-2003 timeframe. And the common thing that brought us together was the common interest of playing with technology to create impactful things. It wasn't academic collaboration, it wasn't business collaboration, but just a common interest of playing with technology to create impactful things. And that's something which gave us the clarity and conviction of sticking together, despite soon enough realizing that we were in an ecosystem where there were a lot of odds against us. We started at a time when India was not known to create great hardware stories. So there was no one who would believe on a scalable hardware story coming out of India. We were at a time where drones as a technology or as a market were not heard of and not well understood. So we, being naive students out of IIT, took on the challenge of educating the market about what drones could do. And we underestimated the challenge. We thought it'll be a shorter journey than what it was, and it took us much, much longer to educate the ecosystem about what was the potential of drones. And we also started at a time when the investment ecosystem wasn't ready for a venture which was into hardware and was working with defense. Both were a no-go for majority of the venture ecosystem. And it became an uphill battle for us, and that's where I think the association with SINE as an incubator for us paved the right sort of early nurturing grounds for us. We became part of SINE in 2007. In fact, the motivation to incorporate our company officially came because of the process of getting incubated at SINE. We had started our effort informally, but to be part of the incubator, we needed to be a private limited company, and that's how we got incorporated in February 2007. And the whole journey began as an official entity called ideaForge. The name ideaForge was motivated by the sense we had that we had the motivation to, at that time at least, we had lots and lots of ideas, and we didn't want to limit ourselves to a particular idea. So the theme was to forge, to give shape to ideas and convert them into reality. So ideaForge is the whole process of forging, the hardware process of giving shape to metal to make useful things out of it. From the start itself, we have focused on the core technology that brings about the drone as a full product. And what we experience initially as assuming it's a product, later on we realized that it was just a technology prototype. One of the earliest examples of that, you may recall, was shown in the movie 3 Idiots, That was one of the earliest prototypes that we made, and the movie makers thought that it's an interesting project to showcase in the movie, and that example became part of that movie. And funnily enough, later on, people would say, it seems you guys copied your idea from that movie, which was interesting to experience. So all along, I think the initial years from 2007 to many number of years beyond it, I think we outlived our official stay at SINE, and SINE team were kind enough to continue hosting us and giving us the support that we wanted, introducing us to the variety of investor and industry ecosystem that SINE had access to. But the initial few years were one of the toughest that we had, because in an environment where there is no funding ecosystem and the market itself is not ready to adopt your product, you have to really figure out how to sustain yourself. And sort of surprisingly enough, or through the business practices that we were able to evolve, we were able to self-sustain ourselves. So for the initial about 5 to 10 years, we were barely funded by the venture ecosystem, and we grew based on creating business. And I think it is very, very important for early stage companies to quickly get into a place where the business fundamentals start supporting its growth, because overly relying on the ecosystem for funding to stay aloft becomes difficult, especially in areas which are not, whose potential are not already realized by the ecosystem. So even today, I'm sure there would be industries and segments which are not as well appreciated by the ecosystem, and organizations have to place a bet for the future of those particular industries. So it's always helpful for the entrepreneurs to figure out a way to sustainable profitability so that the growth could be internally fueled and sustained rather than waiting for an external factor to ensure survivability. So from the initial years of fighting to set the ecosystem right, both in terms of customer, technology, and the funding ecosystem, to now at a place where over the last few years, the world has seen a turnaround in terms of realizing the criticality of drone as a technology. And I need not spend too much time in establishing the appreciation of the product for the evolving geopolitical scenario which has happened, the realization during the COVID lockdown that both governments and businesses had in terms of lack of mobility, and the scaled requirement for automation in a lot of industrial and security processes. All of this is giving us a sustained growth trajectory right now. And as was mentioned in one of the earlier panels, our aspiration is just not to have a great success out of the Indian ecosystem, but to create a global mark in this industry. So we have already started expanding into the US market, which is the largest market from a technology and business perspective, and hope to establish ourselves as one of the top businesses in the drone segment for particular applications globally. Today, we serve a broad set of defense and civil applications, but our roadmap going forward focuses on expanding into large-scale mobility solutions as well. So this goes back as a reference to one of the other panel discussions which was there about profit, people, and planet. My interpretation of that topic is, like for businesses, profit and people stories are important, and that's equivalent to, as a human, how a physical and mental well-being is important. If you don't have your profit and people practices right, the business will not sustain. The same way as if you don't have your physical and mental well-being right, it is difficult to sustain your day-to-day individual sustainability. But beyond that, what is very important is the purpose. So I would replace planet with purpose. And it is very important for scaled businesses to have clarity and drive motivation through purpose. And the purpose part is something which we relate to our impact in the ecosystem. So while individually, we as entrepreneurs were motivated to play with the technology and have a lot of fun while doing that, but the added part of the motivation for the ecosystem was that through the work that we were doing for defense, the contribution in national security, the work that we were doing in establishing a full industry and drone ecosystem in the country and increasing the business potential and employability in the ecosystem. And eventually, our choices of going electric first. So for example, for transforming the industry, we took a lot of strong choices in our industry of going electric first and not depending on IC engine and gasoline fuel-based solutions. And that made the technology tougher for us, but eventually gave an advantage to us and the customer in transitioning to electric first approach, which is both good for, in some cases, planet, the ecosystem, and the technology ecosystem locally. In the process of growth, we have also focused a lot on working with local entrepreneurs, local supply chain, in indigenizing the global supply chain that we were dependent on. Now, which in turn translates into a cascading business opportunity beyond what we are doing individually into what we are doing for the ecosystem. For example, we were beneficiaries of the drone PLI scheme that the government came out with. But the more interesting part was our suppliers were also amongst the top beneficiaries of the PLI scheme, which is a bigger win because our supplier ecosystem could generate sufficient business to get into a drone PLI scheme beneficiary list. So part of the purpose is also eventually to drive large-scale mobility through the products that we are creating and driving that mobility solutions through electric first approach. An analogy of that is how you are seeing electric cars today. Majority of the industry veterans did not take the initiative of converting our passenger cars into electric first approach. A few players globally took that initiative and drove that transformation, and today all of our ground mobility is set to eventually become electrified. Similarly, electricity-based mobility solutions through the air are some things which are even tougher because it takes a lot more power and energy efficiency to fly. Transforming mobility solutions, moving around hundreds of kgs through air, through an electric first approach is something which is seen as a difficult future to imagine today. But we think it is an inevitable future, and mobility through air will transform the coming decade or so. And we are committed to making that happen as well as we go ahead. So that's an example of the purpose that we relate to. And hence the impact in the ecosystem should not only be looked at from the traditional social impact perspective, but broadly, purpose can translate into various facets. It could be internal security, it could be environment, it could be employment, or it could be just technology and empowerment of the ecosystem. And on the last point particularly, at least what my personal view is, we have seen a transformation in the Indian industry ecosystem of earlier focusing on manufacturing services and delivery as prime part of the business growth and not focusing as much on IP and technology to start with. And over the last couple of decades, our focus has shifted in investing sufficiently into the IP part, and I think our entrepreneurship journey should be fueled by a good amount of IP creation in our ecosystem, which will just not give us local business opportunity, but opportunities to differentiate ourselves globally. So that's a very crisp summary of where we are and what we do. I'm sure I can talk hours and hours about it, but if there are any questions, probably I can answer those in the remaining time. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Just thank you very much, and just hold on. I would like to invite MeitY to please felicitate Rahul on behalf of SIDBI. Thank you very much, Rahul. Thank you. And this is an inspiration for all of us. And thank you very much, Rahul. Thank you very much. Yeah. And now I would also like to hear the incubator's perspective from his journey. So, so I want MeitY to share from incubator's point of view how she saw the baby steps. While we are setting up the stage point,
yeah, so I think this is impromptu pretty much because we are waiting for the chief guest, Honorable Minister here. So until he comes, we will try to converse. The moment we We see him, we abruptly stop and go down. Yeah, but I think like more than incubator perspective, I think Rahul, we are incubator managers here, right? We have seen your stories. You are talking about only drone, but actually you, till the time you figured out on drone or robo, right? You started with a different product. And how did you sustain on workshop, on all those things? It would be a very good lessons for the incubator managers to advise their struggling startup. I think if you can tell that story.
Poini ma'am knows all details about all of our stories, some of the details that we may not be recalling as much. But yeah, the early part of our story probably is an example of the agility that one of the panels spoke about earlier. As we mentioned that we were not set in limiting ourselves to a particular idea, so we kept ourselves, we called ourselves ideaForge. But we started by making alternative energy devices. We were making mobile phone chargers which don't require a source of plug-in charging, a hand crank charger or a cycle-based charger and things like that, and hoping to enable access of mobile devices in rural areas where electrification itself was limited. And that's something that we created a good product out of, but could not figure out the right business model for the rural economy in the country. We thought we could crack the case of selling products to the rural economy while not understanding that today, even though per capita usage of shampoo in a bottle is cheaper, you still have sachets being sold in the rural areas. So the actual business model and financial constraints of the rural economy is something that we couldn't unlock that time. And we were able to eventually pivot to drones as a full-time business, because while we started drones as an interest, even before we started the organization, we had not taken it up as a primary business interest when we incorporated with SINE. But around 2008, when we took part in an international defense competition, just out of academic interest, and realized we were global first along with MIT US, is when we realized that what we were doing out of interest was amongst the global best all around, so we could create a viable business out of it. The other example ma'am mentioned was during that time, again, funding was not there, the initial business traction was not there, but we still had to sustain. And we were roboticists, we were technologists. So we collaborated with another startup which was into technical education. So we became trainers and coaches for that startup to go to various engineering colleges and conduct robotics workshops. That was in line with our interest, but it also helped us sustain our core interests. So we had to be open to such agile options to stay relevant and stay around to eventually unlock the success.
So the point here is that like it's all about team when we talk about entrepreneurship. And that's what basically we had this three boys coming together, and then there was another entrepreneur who joined later on, maybe after a year or so, right? So four of them. And the core purpose of that venture was that how do we stick together and how do we survive? While we really get this, so this was a classic case of a startup you would not believe upfront, no business model, no product, but there is a great team out there. And I think that's where even the first angel investor, right, they invested in the team. Just because like they saw some of the faculty members so closely involved with them, they saw like we supporting them beyond like, kya kar raha hai? There are multiple things are happening in it. This is not a classic formula for a, being a successful startup, doing multiple things and so on and so forth. But survival was the key. Keeping the team together was the key. And that's where I think as an incubator, we put our bet on it. Long story, but organizations are also built over a period of time, not really 4 or 5 years ka unicorn story. I don't think it gives a really, especially those who have worked with Deepan Vita, you might be knowing the same thing. Yeah? 3-4 years unicorn, I don't think these are going to be a very sustainable story. Organizations are built over a period of time. So that's one thing that basically ideaForge was that. Second thing in case of ideaForge was basically the tinkerer. So like student continuously tinkering in the lab, continuously. So you may want to talk about that best product of hovercraft out of the old bike, you know. Can you share that story as
Sure.
well?
So I think going back to emphasizing and appreciating the people practices part, I think even individually for us to come along, while we were graduating, the alternate options for us, we had lucrative financial jobs, higher studies options to go to the US, and a bunch of other exciting opportunities. And this opportunity was the worst financially, the toughest, no vacations, no fun for years to come. But I think why we picked it up was the people we were working with. The simple realization was every other opportunity we can recreate any time in the future. If we choose to go for higher studies, if we want to do a banking job, if you want to do any kind of job, we can do any time. But this special group of people that we have been able to put together, that's something which is hard to recreate. So getting the right team together is a very, very essential part, and the roller coaster of journey that you experience, I think being able to stick around strengthens you a lot. And just wanted to re-emphasize that people practices and the founding team itself is an important part of the journey that you experience. The tinkering part that ma'am mentioned was, again, going back to the origins of ideaForge and how we came together. As I mentioned, some of the tinkering that we were doing were beyond the academic mandate. So in IIT Bombay back then, and even today, motorbikes are banned to be used and operated by students. So it wasn't the case a few years before we came on campus. So when we came on campus, there were a lot of old bikes which were just in the garbage, sort of rotting around. And we thought that we could salvage engines from there and create hovercrafts out of the engines taken from bikes. So the whole tinkering idea started from salvaging something which was worthless but still very valuable in terms of what we could do and create a hovercraft and float on Powai Lake. Those experiments eventually led to us realizing that we could actually create something flying. And what we created, at least for us, was the first and novel idea that we had ever thought of, only to realize eventually that probably great thinkers long back had sketched ideas like that. So there was also a humble realization that a lot of times you may become too full of yourself thinking that you have thought of an idea. While we are called ideaForge, we have come to realize that ideas are not usually unique. There are billions of people out there. Most likely your idea has been thought of by someone. The differentiation is in the conviction and execution behind that. A lot of people think about ideas and leave it. It's the tinkering and the effort that you put behind it which leads to any outcome.
I think I have only last question. Many incubator managers are also dealing with the growing companies, right? Can you share some of the thought on, so you have some people coming from the old times and then you take lateral entry, laterally you employed people and then build the, currently ideaForge has how many, what is the team size, 150?
About 500 full-time,
Sorry.
about 300 contract, so maybe.
So how the whole HR piece that basically worked, or how the people piece worked in leadership, functional leadership, old versus new, managing those dynamics, if you can share something on that.
Yeah, so I think even today we don't have a great answer for that. It's a real tough challenge that you need to manage as you scale. Smaller teams really work together. There's no hierarchy. You have ideal aspirations that you'll be a flat organization. There'll be no hierarchy. But soon to realize that beyond a certain flatness, you start losing efficiency. So you can read theories about the flat and the vertical structures and circular and fishbone diagrams. But reality is always something different. So. But the core part that we remain true to is, I think when we onboard people, we look at people in three aspects. Attitude, aptitude, and knowledge. And we believe attitude is not trainable, so we try to filter on attitude as much as possible. Aptitude is something you could test for. knowledge is not learnable. So we don't reject people on the gap on knowledge, but we probably focus on more a selection process on aptitude and attitude being the most significant. And the attitude part is where the whole conflict between the old and new happens. You have an old team that you've started with, and the aspiration of the old team to really grow into the leadership in the future always remains. But soon you realize that you yourself, being entrepreneurs, may not be the best leaders because all the experience you have had is struggling out of the college, and what is net new experience you'll add to the whole ecosystem. So you try to get the right kind of experience from the industry. So we've gone through that transformation and we have made our share of mistakes. But I think the only thing that works is being aware about it and being intentful and deliberate about making it work. Having an open conversation with the team which is there, and sort of in the transition period, really being part of that transition rather than just putting two things in the box and hoping it works out. So I think overall from that perspective, no universal formula, because we're dealing with people. There are no universal formula for people in general other than having trust, relatability and transparency with people. So if we work with the fundamentals of those things in any of such transitions, I think there's a higher likelihood of making it work.
Thank you, Rahul. Anyone has any question here? Yeah, go ahead.
Two questions basically. So, yeah, so I am Vibhor Jain from IIT Delhi's Incubation Center. So, we also have some of the drone startups, and they are also facing this cash crunch problem. So, one of our startups, they also went into, so is the guest here, or we have time? Okay, so they were also facing the same, challenge of getting the capital and all. So they were conducting workshops to, kind of self-sustain. But they felt that, they were getting off track due to that workshop thing, and they were not able to focus on their main product. So how do you think that, they can balance between the two things? And the second thing is, what were the three mistakes that you would, mention that in your startup journey, which the startups should, avoid doing?
I think the answer to the first question is people need to be realistic and pragmatic. Over-dependence on a source of resource will, so for example, if you can find the right support in the ecosystem, take it, make use of it, and speed up your journey. But if you can't, be nimble enough to see what is required to stay in the game. Because in a lot of cases, if you have the right idea and if you have conviction about it being relevant in the future, half of the game is about staying around to see that happen. So the staying around part, if it is not facilitated by the ecosystem, then it has to be things that the entrepreneur or the core team should be willing to do to make it stick around. But again, it's a contextual choice someone will have to take in that situation. About the mistakes that we've made, I'm sure there are too many, and probably I think one of the mistakes or one of the overestimations that we did were we thought we were ready for the market, and we underestimated the effort it takes to create a market. So for example, to simplify things, you may have a market, for example, an automotive market. Today, if I decide to do an electric vehicle startup, the need for electric vehicle is today being established by everyone. So you don't have to put the efforts of establishing the need for electric vehicles. You just have to make a good product which matches or exceeds it. But in cases where the electric vehicle need itself is not well established, the effort starts. So really being aware about those choices that you have made and calibrating the effort it takes to create a market rather than sort of substitute a market. So that's one of the examples. Other mistakes I would say is essentially don't compromise your early customers, because they are the road to your success. So I think unlocking the early customers for scaled solutions is an important part. We didn't really make too much mistake on that. In fact, that's also part of our success story. We have continued working with our earliest customers and today doing scaled transformations there. So for example, today our products are used in internal security scenarios at a level which we had not imagined. And all of that was by collaborating and working together with the early customers that we had. Are we out of time?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you. Thank you, Poini. I think that's indeed advice worth $1 billion.